Okay. Okay. All set? All right, good afternoon. So I'm here this afternoon to give an additional update regarding the ongoing investigation into the shooting incident that occurred at 117 North Lake Avenue, an incident that resulted in the death of one man and injuries to 6 others. Because this is an ongoing, sensitive investigation, I am limited in what I can share regarding the incident which occurred in the late hours of Saturday, October 9th. Through our ongoing investigation, we have learned that a group of individuals, including the homicide victim, walked as a group from the area of Central Avenue at approximately 11 p.m. and walked north on Lake Avenue and proceeded to 117 North Lake Avenue. The group approached another group of individuals who were already at 117 North Lake Avenue, and the two groups engaged in a verbal altercation. This verbal altercation quickly escalated, and the two groups exchanged gunfire toward one another. The evidence available to us indicates that at least one person in both groups fired weapons at the time of the altercation. At this point, I just want to make one thing very clear. The homicide victim in this case did not deserve to lose his life, and the Albany Police Department will use every available resource to identify the person or persons responsible and bring them to justice. But our preliminary investigation clearly indicates that the homicide victim was with and a part of the group that walked from Central Avenue and confronted the other group at 117 North Lake Avenue. As we have reported, we have already arrested 10 individuals as a result of the ongoing investigation, including 7 who live in Troy, 1 who lives in Boston Spa, and 1 who lives in Schenectady. We've confiscated 2 illegal handguns. As I first stated Monday, this shooting incident is a painful reminder of the traumatic impact gun violence has on individuals and families in our community. While we're still in the early stages of our investigation, I am confident that we will bring those responsible to justice. And I'd also like to give an update on the shooting that occurred last night in the 600 block of Livingston Avenue. In that incident, a 44-year-old male sustained a gunshot wound to the torso. He's in stable condition. As a result of our investigation into that incident, 2 individuals have been arrested and charged. 27-year-old Elijah Moses from Albany was charged with attempted murder. He's currently under the supervision of New York State parole. And 44-year-old Kayshawn Jenkins from Troy was charged with criminal facilitation in the 4th degree. There's a 3rd person who is also in custody and awaiting charges related to that incident. A handgun was recovered at the scene, and a shotgun was later recovered during the investigation. All 3 were arrested in the city of Albany. And I'll turn it over at this time to the mayor.
Thank you, Chief. And to our residents, the event that occurred this weekend at 117 North Lake Avenue is deeply concerning to all of us. And as Chief Hawkins has outlined, this investigation has our complete and total commitment, and we are focused on ensuring that we are conducting a thorough investigation and bringing people to justice. But it also does not appear to have been a random act of violence. This was 2 groups that confronted one another, and sadly, guns were used, and that proliferation of guns continues to plague our city and cities across this country. And it is challenging in an environment when we have so many guns that are on our streets to fight against those forces, which is why it's so important that we work together to try to keep one another safe and to recognize that when we are talking about establishments like the establishment at 117 North Lake, like the establishment of the bar on Lark Street, that we have now worked out a settlement agreement to allow them to safely reopen, we are looking to work with our community and with our businesses to help them to be safe spaces. I have submitted a request to the State Liquor Authority to revoke the liquor license for 117 North Lake Avenue for a number of reasons. First, I believe that this liquor license should not have been given to this establishment, as it is within 200 feet of a school. And in addition, this is a building, and the director of our codes department can talk more about this, but this is a building that had a cease and desist order and that did not have a certificate of occupancy. So we believe that a liquor license should not have been granted to that particular location. As we stated Tuesday, this is a highly sensitive, serious, and active investigation. And we not only does it have the full attention of our police department, but it has the full attention of our law enforcement partners. We're pleased with the direction of the investigation thus far, but at this point, more information could compromise that investigation, and we are working to ensure that we can move forward quickly and get this matter resolved as quickly as possible. And with that, we can turn it over to questions. As I said, if you have specific questions about the building, the status of the building, and the code violations, our Director of Building and Codes is also here to answer those.
Question for the Chief, just to be clear, are you saying that Alex Bolton was a member of a biker gang?
No, not saying that at all, because we don't have information right now to either confirm or deny that. Now, we've heard that, but we can't confirm or deny as a police department right now with the information that we have.
10 people in custody, or 10 people were arrested. Have they all been freed?
I don't know the status right now of those who have been arrested, so I don't have that information.
Has anyone been charged with murder?
No.
Should people who fire guns on streets be out, in your opinion?
If a person fires a weapon and violates the law and commits a crime like what occurred that night, in my opinion, they should not.
Were the 10 people arrested part of one group or the other?
Yeah, they were part of one group.
Court documents say that 117 North Lake Avenue is known as a Suicide Squad clubhouse. Was that on the police's radar, or what do you know about that club?
Well, we've heard for a while that there was a possibility that we've had organized groups in our city, whether they be biker gangs or other types of gangs or groups. And so it's been on our radar for a while. Now, with this incident here, we just don't have enough information at this point to either confirm or deny that we have biker gangs that are involved in this particular incident.
Did the homicide victim carry a weapon?
We don't have any indication right now that the victim had a weapon.
The Codes Department may have known about this property, but the police department, it appears, did not know that it was not supposed to be operating as it was. Have you uncovered any other properties in the course of your investigation that appear to be operating in plain sight, the same way this club was?
Well, I'll turn it over to Mr. LaJoy here to answer part of that, but I just want to make very clear, we're in very close communication with our Codes Department, our Court Counsel, and other city departments as we're looking at things like this. And with this particular case, I don't know exactly what information in particular was exchanged between Codes and the police, but we have very, very clear lines of communication. The challenge here is that even when we have knowledge, the police department and Codes, sometimes these unlawful establishments, they have these events and we don't know about it. They spontaneously happen. You know, there's something that happens over social media that brings people in, and it can happen very quickly. And so even with knowledge that this should not have been an occupied place, we might not know about it until the violence occurs. And so that's my message to our community, is we need help with some of these. You know, we have a very good system in place with Codes and police and court counsel to identify these places, but members of our community sometimes know about these places and we don't. And it's important that we get this information so that we can act on it, and so we can act on it before our violence occurs. And I'll turn it over to Mr. LaJoy to talk about some of that as well.
I'm able to answer any questions anybody may have.
Did you find out about these violations after Saturday's homicide?
Which violations?
Regarding the lounge.
No, sir. No, I was aware of the violations when we cited them back in May of 2020. And we did not get any compliance. The owner had started to work with Corporation Counsel to try and resolve some of these issues so that they could come into compliance, but they had not done so. So in June of 2020, a letter was drafted and sent to the owner informing them that, they had a list of items that they needed to deal with, and that they were unable to use that property at all as a social club until they had those issues resolved.
So was there a deadline they had to get this resolved by before they could move forward, before you act?
No, sir. No, because once they're told they're no longer able to use it, there's nothing further for us to do because they're not to use it until they get those items resolved.
So they can go indefinitely without having to get back to the city?
If they don't want to open, correct. They could just have stayed closed and never reopened.
So you shut them down more than a year ago, correct?
Correct, June of 20.
How often do you think there was activity inside that building in the subsequent year that passed?
Not a lot. So we had a couple of times where one of my inspectors had been out and saw people sitting on the sidewalk, and we documented it. We took pictures. We forwarded on to Corporation Counsel so that they could continue to work with the owner and informing them that they were unable to do so. But again, once we have had no indication at all since April of 21 that anything was happening there, that there was any use. In fact, at one point there was a for sale sign on it, so we assumed they had just backed off and were staying closed.
Do you have any intelligence information from inside the building?
No, sir.
So isn't it possible then that people were inside doing whatever it was and you have no way of knowing?
That's not for our codes person to answer.
Okay,
So,
sorry.
yeah, I mean, look, the bottom line is that, when we close buildings and when we issue a cease and desist order, when we have a problem property, we do work very closely with the police department. This is an area of focus for us. We want to ensure that every officer who is responding to a call has that information at their fingertips to know whether this is a building that has a cease and desist order that has been issued. But to the chief's point, we need help from the community. And I can't tell you how many events have been stopped because somebody from the community reached out and said that they had been invited to an event, they had been asked to provide security at an event that was not sanctioned and that was not happening in a building that is safe. And to our residents, I would say to you, if you're invited to an underground event, bear in mind that there is absolutely no oversight that we have with respect to those events. Our codes department exists for a reason, to keep people safe from fires, from unhealthy conditions, from unsafe spaces. And our police department works with establishments, be they private clubs, bars, and restaurants, to help them with a safety plan and to ensure that they have the proper training and the proper tools and the proper access that they need to call for help should they need it. Those are all things that we do in order to keep everybody safe. And when we are dealing with establishments that are not licensed, things that are happening underground, it might sound like it's an interesting thing to be involved in, but you are placing yourself really in a dangerous situation, and we want to keep people safe. We have no issue with having social clubs and other establishments in the city, provided that they are safe from a code standpoint and they have a safety plan, as worked out in coordination with our police department.
Mayor, what is the penalty for somebody who essentially thumbs their nose at a cease and desist?
Well, the power is off at this building now. So, we do have the ability to take action and to take swift action. And we don't want it to come to that. But we also, are working to ensure, as our codes director said, it can be very difficult. A cease and desist order will be issued. The windows might get papered over. The for sale sign goes up. There might be intermittent activity, and we can't be everywhere all the time, and so it can be a challenge for us. But we are working diligently to ensure that those places that have been identified as problematic, that we deal with them swiftly.
Can you name those locations that are problematic?
Look, I think, we don't know what we don't know, right? So, there certainly are locations that have our attention. And I don't have a list of those locations, but, there certainly are locations that have our attention. And that, we are working with police to ensure that only permitted activity is allowed to happen in those locations. So if somebody has a permit to have a retail establishment, we want to ensure that there are not after-hours parties or other, events with alcohol that are happening there, not as part of their retail business, for example. So this can be very challenging.
And just to clarify, did the shooting start inside the building and then move outside?
Our preliminary investigation indicates that simultaneously the two groups started firing at each other, from one group inside, one group outside.
Have police responded to any 911 calls to 117 North Lake Ave, since June 2020?
I don't have that information, but for what I have been told by my investigators is that there's been little to no activity from a police standpoint at that location.
How many guns were involved in this altercation?
We recovered 2 illegal handguns, but we suspect that there are more involved. We just have not recovered those.
How many shots were fired total? Shell cases were found?
We had anywhere between 60 and 70 shell casings.
60, 70?
Yeah, 60 to 70. 60 to 70 shell casings.
That must have been one hell of a firefight.
There were a lot of rounds that were fired,
So it
yes.
sounds like you're missing
Pardon me?
at least 4 weapons.
I'm sorry?
You're missing 4 weapons.
Well, we suspect that there's some weapons that are out there, and we don't have all of the weapons that are involved. In fact, we know we don't, and it's just a matter of that. And that's what, we talked about the sensitive nature of this investigation, and that's why we're very hesitant to put out too much at this point, because it could hinder our ability to find those other weapons. And not only the weapons, but we still have to find these individuals who caused the death of this young man, and we need to bring that person or those people into custody.
How fast did officers respond to the scene?
I don't have that information.
And
Yes.
Mayor, I know following the closure of Cafe Hollywood, you mentioned that you were looking at other areas or other businesses that may have been problematic. Was this one of those problematic?
No, we did not have an awareness that there was activity. As the chief said, there hadn't been police calls there. I believe we did check that, and this was not a place that was, it was on our radar from a code standpoint and a code enforcement standpoint, but not from the standpoint of activity that was drawing the attention of the police. We are undertaking to look at a number of locations, including corner stores. That has been an ongoing focus, and we really, as I said, we're looking to work with businesses to ensure that they're safe. That's what we want. We're not looking to shut down businesses. We're not looking to harm communities. We're not looking to take away services. What we want to do is to work with businesses and our business community to ensure that their businesses are safe. And that is one of the things that we can focus on, and it's not just, this is, we hear it all the time, this is an all-of-government approach. This is not just the police department. It's our codes department. It's, looking at our planning and our USDO to determine, are there changes that we want to make with the council with respect to business licensing, so that we can really have a clear understanding on the part of our businesses about how they can be safe, how they can keep their customers safe, and how we can move forward and avoid these types of incidences.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My question is, it was 18 months since, the first violent citation was issued. Does it take one person killed and 6 others injured to follow through with?
Again, there were no police calls or very few that, and they were not of any substance. It's not as though there were events happening every night at this location. If that had been the case, it would have been, the power would have been turned off months ago. This is a building that was notified that they were out of compliance. There were a number of inspections that occurred in between the time that letter was issued. There was, we were working with the attorney for the building owner. So, the city, when we're working with an attorney, we work in good faith. At one point, there was a for sale sign in front of this building. When our inspectors went by that building, it did not appear that there was any activity happening in that building. So, in that instance, the owner of a building does have time to determine what they want to do with the building. It could have been converted to residential. There were a number of things that an owner of that property had the right to do, given the fact that the cease and desist had been issued.
Now, the owner of the property said he was granted a certificate of occupancy back in 2017. How long are those certificates good for?
So my understanding is that that certificate of occupancy was not valid, and that was communicated to that individual, and that there were a number of alterations that occurred to the premises that brought it out of compliance in any event. So you can be issued a certificate of occupancy, but then if you do make an alteration to your building that is not done according to code, then you can be issued a cease and desist order and told that you can't occupy that building until that's corrected.
So is that what happened there at this location?
Yes, the first item that brought them out of compliance is they started to put out chairs and tables on the sidewalk and have alcohol out on the sidewalk, which requires a cafe permit, and they did not apply for one, they did not have one. So that was the initial citation. As the mayor said, there's several things that a person can do to alter a building, whether it's physically or just operationally, that will bring them out of compliance, and therefore their CO is not valid.
Mayor, as I recall, you were a supporter of bail reform, and I'm wondering if the fact that people who apparently recklessly shot up a neighborhood are out on the street bolsters the argument on the other side of that issue.
So there have been no charges, to my understanding, among those who are arrested. This is still a very preliminary investigation. I think to the chief's point, if somebody is charged with firing those weapons, then yes, my expectation would be that that individual would be remanded. I also believe that we need to ensure that in a world where we have bail reform, that we recognize that we need to change our approach to pretrial supervision, which is starting to happen, and other means for the police to be able, and the criminal justice system to be able to ensure that that individuals are being monitored and tracked to the extent that they've engaged in concerning violent behavior.
Well,
I think but I just want to say, I will remind everyone, and this is, Christopher Porco was out on bail. He committed a heinous homicide. Okay, so, there are people who have wealth who are able to get out on bail, and just because you set bail does not mean that a person who's committed a violent act doesn't have the opportunity to get out. It's just that poor people typically don't. That was the point of bail reform.
Are you comfortable with the amount of discretion that judges have?
I believe that we need to take a look after we've had a chance to absorb the data to determine whether or not there need to be changes made with respect to, in New York State, the fact that we are not able to the judges are not able to take into consideration the potential for danger. That's not something they're allowed to consider.
We've got time for one more. If re-elected as mayor, what's your game plan, for combating violence as the mayor?
Well, look, this isn't about if I'm reelected or not. This is, we have a game plan that worked. We have a game plan that has reduced crime. We are seeing an uptick in gun violence in this city as we are seeing it across the country. We have a criminal justice system that shut down during COVID. We have a court system that is just now starting to come back online. And so we have to ensure that all of the tools that we have are able to be fully utilized. When we have those tools in place, our GIVE initiative, our violence interrupters, which we are expanding, by the way. The city is funding new violence interrupters, and we will be opening another snug office in the South End to be able to respond to these disputes that happen, to try to interrupt violence before it happens. Those are all things that led to historically low homicide and gun rates in this city just 2 years ago. So I think that that is something that we have to recognize. We have tools that we know work, and our residents need to know that we remain committed to ensuring that those tools fully operate and that we get our department back to full force. We face the same challenges that cities across the country face, yet we are, I think, from the standpoint of where we were, we are ahead of many of those cities in being able to address those issues.
What about, I was going to talk about funding, police funding. Your thoughts on, refunding some of the money that was taken away from the police department, into the budget?
So there has never been money. There has not been money taken away from the police department. right? The police department budget from the time I was elected mayor to today is well over 6% higher, okay? So this is not about funding. This is not about money. We have a challenge with the number of officers that we have because a number of officers have chosen to leave. This is a very challenging environment to recruit police. That is true not just in the city of Albany, but everywhere across the country. You can talk to any mayor in any city, even here in upstate New York, that recruitment is very challenging. It's not because we don't have funding. We 100% have funding. We have not eliminated any positions. We have added positions to the police department, proposed in our 2022 budget to try to help offload some of the more case management so that our officers can focus more on their work on the streets. So at no time have I suggested that we cut the police department budget.
Thank you, everyone.